Johnny didn't just like Elvis Presley. He lived Elvis Presley. Every waking moment, every school day, doodle, every breath he took felt like it vibrated with the rhythm of jailhouse rock. He was 12 years old, scrawny for his age, with a mop of unruly brown hair that stubbornly refused to fall into a perfect pompadour like his idols. His bedroom, a cramped space above the garage, was a shrine. Faded magazine cutouts of Elvis adorned the walls, taped haphazardly next to a record player that hummed almost constantly with the King's latest hits. The records themselves were a mismatched collection, some bought with saved allowance, others discovered in dusty bargain bins. He'd spend hours mimicking Elvis's signature sneer in the cracked mirror, attempting to swivel his hips with the same effortless grace, only to nearly trip over his own feet. His parents, bless their hearts, tolerated his obsession with a mix of amusement and slight concern. "It's just a phase, Johnny boy," his dad would chuckle, ruffling his hair. His mom would just smile, her eyes twinkling while she did the dishes, humming a tune that was definitely not Hound Dog. But Johnny knew it wasn't a phase. This was his life, his passion, his everything. It was folded neatly on the kitchen table one Tuesday morning, right next to his half-eaten bowl of oatmeal. His dad usually read the sports section first, but this time the entertainment page was folded outwards, screaming in bold black headlines, "Elvis Presley announces tour dates, coming to your Grand City Arena." Johnny's spoon clattered into his bowl, sending milk splashing over the table. His heart hammered against his ribs like a drum solo. Grand City. That was only 2 hours away by bus or a quick drive in his dad's old Ford. It wasn't New York or Hollywood, but it was here. It was within reach. He snatched the paper, his fingers trembling as he scanned the details. One night only. Tickets on sale next Saturday. He devoured every word, his eyes shining with an almost feverish intensity. This wasn't just a concert. It was an event, a pilgrimage, a chance to be in the same room, breathe the same air as the man who had set his world on fire. "Johnny, easy there," his mom said gently, wiping up the spilled milk. "You'll wrinkle the paper. He's coming, Mom. Elvis is coming." Johnny practically shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. His dad peered over the top of his own section of the paper, a smile playing on his lips. "Well, I'll be the king himself. You going to shine up those dancing shoes, son?" "I have to go," Johnny declared, suddenly determined. "I just have to." His parents exchanged a look. "Tickets for these big shows aren't cheap, Johnny," his dad warned, his voice soft. "Especially for someone like Elvis. They sell out fast, too." Johnny knew this. He wasn't naive. He'd seen the prices of records, the cost of a new pair of blue suede shoes he desperately wanted, but knew he couldn't afford. He looked down at his own worn sneakers, then at his almost empty piggy bank sitting on his dresser back in his room. It was a ceramic pig chipped at the ear that he'd been stuffing coins into since he was 6. It had been meant for a new baseball glove, or perhaps a fancy model airplane kit. But now its purpose was clear. "How much do you think a ticket is?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, dread pooling in his stomach. His dad shrugged. "Hard to say, son. Maybe $10, $15 for a good seat. Probably more." $10, $15, that was an astronomical sum. Johnny usually got $1 a week for chores, maybe another 50 cents if he helped old Mrs. Henderson with her gardening. The concert was in 6 weeks. It seemed impossible. A knot formed in his stomach. How could he possibly earn that much? He spent most of his free time listening to music or practicing his moves, but the image of Elvis, bathed in the spotlight, shaking the stage with his raw energy, filled his mind. He couldn't miss it. He wouldn't. He folded the newspaper carefully, clutching it like a precious map to buried treasure. This wasn't just about money, it was about his dream. It was about proving to himself, and maybe to his parents, that his love for Elvis wasn't just a childish fancy. It was real, and he was going to make it happen, no matter what it took. He felt a surge of resolve, a fire igniting deep within him. He would save every pennywork, every extra chore, do whatever was necessary. He would be there. He had to be. He looked at the newspaper one last time at Elvis's smiling face before heading to his room. The chipped ceramic pig seemed to stare back at him, challenging him. He picked it up, felt its surprising lightness. It was almost empty. His jaw tightened. This was going to be harder than he thought. But the reward, the chance to see his hero, was worth every sacrifice. His dream had a deadline, and he was going to meet it. Chipped ceramic pig, which Johnny affectionately called the vault, became his primary focus. He shook it, imagining the comforting jingle of coins, but all he heard was the lonely rattle of a few pennies and a nickel. This wouldn't do, not by a long shot. $10 to $15 felt like a king's ransom. It was more of a wish list with numbers next to it, scrawled on the back of an old math homework sheet. Every potential source of income was listed: allowance helping Mrs. Henderson, raking leaves for neighbors, washing cars. He even considered selling some of his comic books. A desperate thought quickly dismissed. Superman might be strong, but he couldn't sing Heartbreak Hotel. His first target was his allowance. His parents, seeing his newfound zeal, agreed to a temporary raise for extra chores. "If you're serious about this, Johnny," his mom said, "you'll have to earn it." And earn it he did. The house had never been cleaner. He dusted the living room furniture until it gleamed vacuumed carpets with military precision, and even cleaned out the dreaded gutters, a job usually reserved for his dad. His mom, usually patient, sometimes had to remind him that the silverware didn't need to be polished every single day. Next, he expanded his operations. Old Mr. Abernathy down the street, known for his perpetually overgrown lawn, was his first client. Johnny approached him with a polite, if slightly nervous pitch. "Mr. Abernathy, sir, I could mow your lawn for, say, $1.50. Mr. Abernathy, surprised by the boy's initiative, agreed with a grin. Johnny attacked the lawn with an old rusty mower, pushing until his arms ached and sweat beaded on his forehead. That $1.50 felt like pure gold, clinking proudly into the vault. He raked leaves for 3 different houses that autumn, his back protesting with every pile. He washed Mrs. Henderson's car until its faded paint sparkled. And he even volunteered to walk her fussy poodle, Precious, a task he usually avoided like the plague. Precious had a habit of sniffing every lamppost for 5 minutes straight. Now, each sniff was a potential 5 cents closer to Elvis. His friends, usually eager to drag him into a game of stickball or a bike race, found Johnny strangely busy. "Come on, Johnny, we're heading to the creek," Mark, his best friend, called one afternoon. Johnny, elbow deep in suds scrubbing the neighbor's dusty station wagon, just shook his head. "Can't, Mark. Got to earn my ticket." Mark just rolled his eyes, used to Johnny's Elvis obsession. "You're crazy, you know that." "Maybe," Johnny grunted, wiping a streak of soap from his eye. "But I'll be crazy in the same room as Elvis Presley." There were moments of weakness. One sunny Saturday, the ice cream truck jingled its tempting tune down their street. Johnny's mouth watered. A double scoop of Rocky Road was his favorite. $1 well spent. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the crumpled dollar bill he'd just earned from polishing his dad's chrome bumper. His stomach growled. Then an image flashed in his mind. Elvis, guitar in hand, swaying to the music. The Rocky Road could wait. The dollar went straight into the vault. His parents watched him with a quiet pride. They saw the tired slump of his shoulders, the determined glint in his eyes. His mom started packing him bigger lunches, and his dad would sometimes supervise his chores, which usually meant handing him a cold glass of lemonade. They didn't offer to pay for the ticket directly. They understood that this was Johnny's quest, his personal Everest. Slowly, painstakingly, the vault grew heavier. The lonely rattle turned into a satisfying clinking, then a solid thud. He started keeping a ledger, a notebook, with tally marks, meticulously tracking every dime and quarter. After 3 weeks, he had a little over $9. It was progress, but the finish line still felt impossibly far. "How much more do you need, son?" his dad asked one evening, watching Johnny painstakingly count his coins. "Depends on the seat, Dad," Johnny replied, biting his lip. "But I need at least $5, maybe $6 more to be safe." His dad nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "Keep at it, Johnny. You're doing good." The concert mounted, Johnny started waking up earlier, going to bed later. He was the first one out the door looking for chores, and the last one to give up for the day. He imagined the feeling of the ticket in his hand, the rustle of the crowd, the roar when Elvis finally walked onto the stage. That image shrilled him, pushing him through tired muscles and aching feet. He felt like a tiny, determined squirrel burying every nut, knowing winter was coming and he needed to be ready. He wasn't just saving money. He was building a dream, one coin at a time. The weight of the vault in his hands wasn't just metal. It was hope. The day the tickets went on sale dawned gray and drizzly, mirroring the nervous churn in Johnny's stomach. He'd carefully counted his money the night before, pouring every last coin from the vault onto his bedspread. $15.42. It was enough, just barely. He had decided he'd go for the cheapest seat available, whatever it was. Just being inside the arena, seeing Elvis with his own eyes was enough. His mom, seeing his pale face and tightly clenched fists at breakfast, offered to drive him to the Grand City Arena box office. "You look like you're heading to war, honey," she said, softly squeezing his shoulder. "It's important, Mom," he mumbled, trying to swallow his toast. His throat felt tight. The drive felt endless, even though his mom pushed the old Ford a little faster than usual. Johnny stared out the window, watching the raindrops streak down the glass, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities and anxieties. What if they were already sold out? What if the cheapest seats were still too expensive? When they finally pulled into the arena parking lot, a wave of disappointment washed over him. A line already snaking around the corner of the building stood huddled under umbrellas and raincoats. It was a long line, full of teenagers, with impossibly high hair and girls giggling with excitement, their faces plastered with makeup. He felt small, out of place, clutching his crumpled $15 in his sweaty palm. "Oh dear," his mom murmured, pulling the car into a parking space. "Looks like you're not the only fan, Johnny boy." She stayed in the car reading a magazine while Johnny joined the end of the line. The rain intensified, soaking through his thin jacket. He shivered, but not just from the cold. The air was thick with anticipation, the hum of hundreds of hopeful voices. An hour passed, then another. His feet ached, his teeth chattered, but he held his ground, fueled by a stubborn refusal to give up. He could hear snippets of conversation from the people ahead of him. "He's amazing. I heard he shakes his legs so fast you can barely see it. I hope he sings 'Don't Be Cruel.'" Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he was almost at the front. He could see the ticket window, a small, brightly lit square. A man with a stern face sat inside, sliding tickets and taking money. Johnny's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was it. Next! The man barked. Johnny stepped forward, his voice a little hoarse from the cold. "One ticket, please, sir." "For Elvis?" the man asked, not looking up. "Yes, sir," Johnny practically chirped. The man tapped on his keyboard, then looked up, his expression grim. "All the good seats are gone, kid. Only upper balcony left. $18. $18. Johnny's jaw dropped. $18. He had $15.42. His carefully hoarded fortune, the product of weeks of back-breaking chores, was not enough. A cold dread seeped into his bones, colder than the rain. "Is there anything cheaper?" he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Even the very back standing room." The man sighed, a weary sound. "Look, kid, this is Elvis Presley. There's no cheap seat left. You want a ticket? It's $18 for the nosebleeds. Take it or leave it." He gestured impatiently to the line behind Johnny. Johnny stood frozen, the noise of the crowd suddenly fading into a distant buzz. $18. It was so close, yet so far. He had worked so hard. He felt a hot sting behind his eyes. All that effort, all that dreaming for nothing. Then, as he was about to turn away defeated, the man spoke again, his voice flat. "Wait, I might have one single seat left way in the back, last row, last corner. It's partially obstructed view, but it's $16, still too much for you." Kid, $16, still beyond his reach, but closer. Johnny's mind raced. He had to think. He couldn't just walk away. "Sir, I have $15.42. Is there any way?" He held out the crumpled bills and jingling coins, a desperate plea in his eyes. The man looked at his money, then at Johnny's pleading face. He squinted. He seemed to debate, then let out another sigh. "All right, kid. Christmas in July. You got lucky. I'll make up the difference myself. Just get out of here before I change my mind." He snatched the money, counted it quickly, and then with a flourish, pushed a small, stiff ticket through the slot. Johnny stared at the ticket. It was a simple piece of cardstock, but it felt like the most precious thing he had ever held. Section 304, Row Z, Seat 1. The very last row, the very last seat. "Obstructed view. Thank you so much," Johnny stammered, grabbing the ticket before the man could retract his offer. He practically floated away from the window, oblivious to the rain, a wide, triumphant grin splitting his face. He had done it. He had a ticket to see Elvis. The dream against all odds was real. The day of the concert arrived wrapped in a nervous excitement that made Johnny's hands tremble. He barely slept, his mind buzzing with Elvis songs and images of the Grand City Arena. His ticket, Section 304. Row Z, Seat 1 was tucked safely in the breast pocket of his best and only clean shirt. Closest to his thrumming heart, his mom, sensing his high-strung state, made him a special breakfast, pancakes shaped like guitars. His dad, unusually quiet, kept glancing at him, a soft, almost wistful smile on his face. "Ready, superstar?" his dad finally asked, ruffling his hair. "We should get going. Grand City traffic can be a beast." Johnny nodded, too excited to speak. Tried to shine them, but they still looked far from the polished, flashy shoes Elvis wore. He pulled on his faded blue jeans, the ones with a small tear at the knee, and grabbed his jacket. It was a cool evening and he wanted to be warm. He felt a pang of longing for a new outfit, something cool, something that said Elvis fan, but he quickly pushed it aside. He had a ticket. That was what mattered. The old Ford purred to life, and they began the 2-hour drive to Grand City. Johnny sat in the back seat, staring out the window, watching the familiar landscape give way to larger towns, then the sprawling, unfamiliar streets of the city. Billboards for everything from toothpaste to new cars flashed by, and the buildings grew taller, casting long shadows. His dad tried to make conversation, pointing out landmarks, but Johnny was too lost in his own thoughts. He imagined the arena filling up the buzz of anticipation, the moment the lights would dim and a single spotlight would hit the stage. He even mentally rehearsed his Elvis moves in the cramped back seat, much to his mom's amusement. As they got closer, the city seemed to vibrate with a different kind of energy. More cars were on the road, many of them packed with teenagers, their windows down, rock and roll music spilling out. Girls in poodle skirts and boys with slicked back hair walked along the sidewalks, all heading in the same direction. The air itself seemed to crackle with excitement. Then he saw it, the Grand City Arena. It wasn't just a building, it was a colossal concrete behemoth. Its entrance lit up like a beacon. The sheer size of it took his breath away. People swarmed around it like ants. A vibrant, noisy river of humanity. Posters of Elvis, larger than life, adorned the walls, his famous sneer frozen in cardboard. "Wow," Johnny breathed, his face pressed against the window. His dad found a parking spot a few blocks away and they started walking. The crowd grew thicker with every step. The sounds of distant rock and roll music, laughter, and excited chatter filled the air. Johnny felt a surge of belonging, a connection to all these strangers who loved Elvis just as much as he did. As they approached the main entrance, the energy became almost palpable. Vendors hawked glow in the dark Elvis pins and scarves. A group of girls shrieked, As a car drove by, its occupants yelling something Johnny couldn't quite make out. He saw a man selling hot dogs, the smell of grilled meat mixing with the faint scent of hairspray and cheap perfume. His dad led him to one of the many entrance gates. "All right, son," he said, his voice a little gruff. "This is it. Remember where we parked? We'll meet you here right after the show. Okay? Don't talk to strangers. Stay with the crowd." Johnny nodded, his eyes wide, taking it all in. He felt a mix of immense excitement and a tiny flicker of nervousness. He was truly on his own now in this massive, overwhelming place. "You got your ticket safe?" his mom asked, her eyes scanning the milling crowd. He patted his shirt pocket. "Right here, Mom." She hugged him tightly. "Have fun, sweetie. Call us from a payphone if you need anything." He grinned, feeling a surge of independence. "I will." Presented his ticket to the usher, a stern-looking man with a flashlight. The usher barely glanced at it, just tore off the stub and pointed, "Section 304 upstairs. Keep walking, kid." Johnny took a deep breath, the smell of popcorn and something vaguely metallic filling his nostrils. Clutched his ticket stub, his heart pounding a furious rhythm. He was inside. The journey had begun, and the real adventure was just about to start. He walked into the cavernous interior of the arena, his eyes wide with wonder, ready for the concert of a lifetime. The interior of the Grand City Arena was a dizzying spectacle. It was a vast circular space, bathed in a dim, expectant light. Rows and rows of seats stretched upwards, disappearing into the distant gloom. A massive stage draped in black velvet and currently empty sat at the far end awaiting its king. The air thrummed with a low hum of anticipation, punctuated by the excited chatter of thousands of people finding their places. Johnny felt a surge of awe, mixed with a little bit of being overwhelmed. He'd never been in such a huge building before. The noise, the sheer number of people, the vastness of the space, it was all much grander than he'd imagined. He was just one tiny speck in a sea of adoring fans. He consulted his ticket stub. Section 304 row Z, seat 1. The usher had pointed him towards a distant stairwell. He started his ascent, climbing seemingly endless flights of concrete steps. With every step, the stage seemed to shrink, becoming a distant speck. He passed excited groups of teenagers, parents with their kids, even older couples, all sharing the same buzz of excitement. Finally, after what felt like walking up a mountain, he reached the very top level. The air here was cooler, and the faint murmur of the crowd below seemed to float up to him. He found Section 304, a small, isolated area tucked high in a corner. His heart sank a little. The view from up here was distant. Very, very distant. He walked down the narrow aisle past occupied seats until he reached row Z, and there it was, seat 1. It was indeed in the absolute last corner, almost touching the wall. He sat down, a little lump forming in his throat. From here, the stage looked like a postage stamp. He could barely make out the black drapes, let alone imagine seeing Elvis's famous gyrations. A large support pillar meant for the arena roof partially blocked his view of the very center of the stage, just as the ticket man had warned. Obstructed view. His initial excitement began to wane, replaced by a quiet disappointment. He had saved. He had worked. He had journeyed all this way just to see a tiny figure from miles away, half hidden by a concrete pillar. Pulled out the crumpled dollar bill that was left from his ticket purchase, the last dollar from his hard-earned savings. It felt so small, so insignificant now. He sighed, letting his shoulders slump. He watched as the arena slowly filled up, the sea of faces blurring into an indistinct mass. The lights above him were dim, casting long shadows. He tried to crane his neck around the pillar, but it was no use. He'd barely be able to see Elvis's left arm. Maybe the crowd below began to get louder. A restless murmur. An opening act, a local doo-wop group, came out. Their voices echoed strangely in the vast space, and from his vantage point they looked like tiny ants moving on a black tabletop. He tried to enjoy it, he really did, but it was hard when his dream of seeing Elvis up close felt so crushed. Closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the distant music, letting the disappointment wash over him. He thought of all the chores, the missed games, the sacrifice of his ice cream money. Was this all it was, for a partial view from the nosebleeds? He felt a sudden, unexpected urge to just stand up and leave, to escape the crushing reality of his situation. But then he remembered why he was here. He might not have the best seat, but he was here. He would make the best of it. He leaned forward, trying to peer around the pillar, straining his neck to get a better angle. He would listen. He would feel the vibrations. He would try to imagine. This was Elvis. Even a glimpse was better than nothing. Took a deep breath, pushing down the sting of disappointment. He was going to see his hero one way or another. The opening act finished to polite applause, and the arena lights dimmed further. The roar of the crowd grew a low, expectant rumble that made the wooden floor beneath Johnny's feet vibrate. This was it. Elvis was next. Johnny's heart hammered against his ribs again, pushing away the lingering disappointment from his terrible seat. He leaned forward, squinting, trying to make out any movement on the distant stage. Just as the anticipation reached a fever pitch, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Not on the stage, but in the aisle next to his row. A man in a crisp suit, his hair neatly combed, stood there scanning the upper rows. He looked different from the ushers. He had an air of authority, a quiet confidence. Johnny instinctively straightened up, worried he might be in trouble for leaning too far out of his seat. The man's gaze swept over the sparsely populated upper balcony section. His eyes seemed to pause just for a moment on Johnny. Johnny, self-conscious in his faded jeans and scuffed sneakers, quickly looked away, pretending to be absorbed by the stage. But a moment later he felt a light tap on his shoulder. He turned around. It was the man in the suit. He had a kind but serious expression. "Excuse me, son," he said, his voice low and calm over the excited buzz of the crowd. "Are you Johnny?" Johnny's eyes widened. How did this man know his name? He hadn't told anyone. "Yes, sir," he stammered, confused. "I'm Mr. Roberts," the man said, offering a slight, reassuring smile. "I'm with Mr. Presley's team." Johnny's mouth went dry. "Elvis Presley's team?" Mr. Roberts' smile softened a little. "No problem at all, Johnny. Quite the opposite, in fact." He glanced around, making sure no one was paying too much attention. "My colleague down by the box office mentioned you said you were quite determined to get a ticket, even if it meant scraping every last penny together." Johnny felt a flush rise to his cheeks, so the ticket man had said something. He'd made an impression. He also mentioned that your seat up here, well, it's not exactly the best view for a dedicated fan, is it? Mr. Roberts continued, his eyes twinkling. He gestured subtly towards the large pillar obstructing Johnny's view. Johnny nodded slowly, feeling a knot of uncertainty in his stomach. He wasn't sure where this was going. Was this a trick? Was he about to be moved to an even worse seat? "Mr. Presley likes to know his true fans are getting the best experience," Mr. Roberts said, his voice dropping a little. "He appreciates the dedication, the effort. He believes everyone should have a chance to see him properly." Johnny blinked. "What was he saying so?" Mr. Roberts continued, holding out a hand. "How would you like to have a slightly better view of the show tonight?" Johnny's heart gave a sudden, powerful lurch. "A better view?" he echoed, hope flickering within him, pushing back the confusion. "Like, closer?" "Much closer," Mr. Roberts confirmed, his smile widening. "How about the front row?" Johnny stared at him, completely speechless. That was where the movie stars sat. The rich people. The people who wore fancy clothes and had connections. Not a scrawny kid in a faded shirt and scuffed sneakers who just barely scraped together $16 for the worst seat in the house. "This had to be Adria's," Johnny whispered, his voice trembling. Mr. Roberts nodded, completely serious. "Come on, the show's about to start. We don't want you to miss a minute." He held out his hand again. "Trust me, Johnny. You've earned it." Johnny still couldn't quite believe it. His mind was a whirlwind of disbelief and a surging, exhilarating hope. He looked at his pathetic, obstructed view, then at the calm, reassuring face of Mr. Roberts. What did he have to lose? He had nothing to lose. His dream was so close, closer than he had ever dared to imagine. He took a shaky breath, then slowly, tentatively, reached out and took Mr. Roberts' outstretched hand. This was either the craziest moment of his life or the most amazing. He chose to believe it was the latter. Johnny's hand was still trembling as he placed it in Mr. Roberts's. The man's grip was firm, surprisingly gentle. "Right this way, Johnny," Mr. Roberts said, and started to lead him out of the row. Johnny hesitated for a moment, glancing back at his lonely seat. Row Z, seat 1, a small dark void in the corner. It felt unreal, like leaving a forgotten past behind. He felt a rush of adrenaline, a mixture of fear and pure unadulterated excitement. What if this was a mistake? What if he was going to be led to some back alley and told it was a prank? But the man's eyes were kind and his voice held no hint of deception. Mr. Roberts led him away from the upper balcony, down a different set of stairs, bypassing the main stairwells. They went through a discreet door, marked staff only, which led to a quiet, carpeted hallway. The roar of the crowd, which had been so deafening a moment ago, was muffled here, a distant, muffled hum. "Where are we going?" Johnny asked, his voice barely a squeak. His eyes darted around, taking in the plain walls, the closed doors. This felt like a secret world hidden from the thousands of fans just outside. "To your new seat," Mr. Roberts replied with a knowing smile. "But first, a small detour." They walked further down the corridor, passing a few people in similar suits who nodded respectfully to Mr. Roberts. Johnny's heart thumped. Each step felt like walking deeper into the heart of the mystery. He caught a faint whiff of cologne and something sweet like hairspray. They stopped in front of another door, this one unmarked. Mr. Roberts knocked softly, then opened it just a crack, peeking inside. He then pushed it open wider, ushering Johnny in. Johnny stepped into a small, brightly lit room. His eyes immediately went to the person standing in the center. He froze. It was him. Taller than he looked in pictures, with that unmistakable dark hair, those famous sideburns, and a sequined cream-colored suit that shimmered under the lights. Elvis Presley. He was talking quietly to another man, his back mostly to the door. But Johnny could still see that unmistakable profile. The way his jaw worked as he spoke. Johnny's breath hitched in his throat. He felt like he couldn't move, couldn't speak. This wasn't just a poster or a record. This was the king in the flesh, only a few feet away. His hands went clammy, and he felt the blush creep up his neck. Elvis turned slightly, and his eyes, a startling blue even from a distance, met Johnny's. Paused his conversation, a warm, genuine smile spreading across his face. "Well, hello there, little fella," Elvis said, his voice a low, smooth drawl, exactly like it sounded on his records. He had a slight southern accent, says, "Heard you pulled out all the stops to get a ticket." That's mighty impressive for a young man. He took a step closer, and Johnny felt his legs almost give out. He could see the intricate embroidery on Elvis's suit, the slight sheen of sweat already on his forehead. "What's your name, son?" "JJ Johnny Sird," he stammered finally, finding his voice, though it came out as a pathetic squeak. "Johnny," Elvis repeated, the name sounding perfect in his voice. He reached out and gently ruffled Johnny's hair, the same way his dad did, but this touch felt like electricity. "Well, Johnny, I appreciate folks like you. Takes a lot of grit to save up for something you want that bad." Johnny just stared, still reeling. He wanted to say something, anything, but his mind was blank, filled only with the overwhelming presence of his hero. So Elvis continued, his blue eyes twinkling. "Mr. Roberts here is going to show you to your new seat. It's a little closer to the action. What do you say?" Johnny finally found his voice, a little louder this time. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you." Elvis winked. "My pleasure, Johnny. Now you go on and enjoy the show. I'll see you out there." He gave a final warm smile, then turned back to the other man. Mr. Roberts gently put a hand on Johnny's back. "All right, Johnny, time to go." Johnny let himself be led out. He had just met Elvis Presley. The king had spoken to him. He had ruffled his hair. It was more than he could have ever dreamed. The memory burned brightly in his mind. A precious, unbelievable moment. Continued down another short hallway, then emerged into the main arena. The sound of the crowd was back, louder now, A deafening roar, and Johnny gasped. They were at the very front, not just the first row of a section, but the actual front row, right against the low barrier that separated the audience from the stage. The stage, which had been a distant postage stamp, was now massive, overwhelming. Right there in front of him, the empty microphone stand gleamed under the bright lights. "Here you go, Johnny," Mr. Roberts said, gesturing to an empty seat right in the middle of the front row. "Enjoy the show." Johnny slid into the plush red seat, his heart pounding like a drum solo. He was in the front row. The front row. He could almost reach out and touch the stage. He looked around at the faces of the people next to him, their expressions, a mix of excitement and anticipation. No one seemed to notice the scrawny kid who had just materialized in their midst. They were all focused on the stage, waiting. Johnny took a shaky breath, then leaned forward, unable to tear his eyes away from the stage. He wasn't dreaming. This was real, and any second now, Elvis Presley would walk out onto that stage, just feet away from him. The plush red seat felt like a throne. Johnny sank into a daze, his hands gripping the armrests. The stage, so close he could almost feel the heat of the spotlights, dominated his vision. Every scuff mark on the stage floor, every glint of metal on the microphone stand, he could see it all. This wasn't an obstructed view from the nosebleeds. This was a view fit for royalty. He replayed the last few minutes in his head. Mr. Roberts, the secret hallway, the unexpected room. And then Elvis, his deep voice, the warmth in his eyes, the way he'd ruffled Johnny's hair. It felt like a dream, so vivid and unbelievable. He pinched himself hard. Nope. The roar of the crowd grew louder. A hungry beast, impatient for its meal. The lights in the arena flickered, then dimmed even further, plunging the audience into near darkness. A single powerful spotlight pierced the gloom, focusing on the empty center of the stage. Johnny's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, joyful drum. This was it. He leaned forward, eyes glued to the stage, almost holding his breath. Then from the wings, a figure emerged. Bathed in the spotlight, a flash of shimmering cream and gold, Elvis Presley strode onto the stage. The roar of the crowd exploded, a deafening wave of screams, applause, and whistles. It was unlike anything Johnny had ever heard. The sound washed over him, a physical force that vibrated through his entire body. Elvis paused, a regal figure in the center of the stage, taking in the adulation. He raised a hand, acknowledging the crowd, and a fresh wave of cheers erupted. Johnny found himself screaming too, his voice lost in the cacophony, but he didn't care. He was part of it, right at the heart of it. Then Elvis's eyes, those impossibly blue eyes, swept over the front row, and for a split second they locked with Johnny's. Elvis's lips curved into that famous mischievous sneer, and he gave Johnny a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, as if to say, "Told you I'd see you out here." Johnny's breath caught. He felt a blush spread across his face, a thrill shooting through him from his toes to the roots of his hair. Elvis remembered him. Elvis had acknowledged him. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. That small gesture, that brief eye contact, cemented the reality of the earlier encounter. It wasn't a dream. The band struck the first chords of Heartbreak Hotel, a raw, bluesy riff that filled the arena. Elvis launched into the song, his voice a powerful, resonant baritone that filled every corner of the vast space. He moved with an effortless grace, his hips swiveling, his legs pumping, his hands gesturing with dramatic flair. Every movement was sharper, more dynamic, more electrifying. Up close, Johnny watched, mesmerized. He had seen the grainy black and white footage on TV, heard the records countless times, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to seeing it live. The sheer energy radiating from Elvis was intoxicating. The way he held the microphone, the way his lips formed each word, the way his famous leg shook with a mind of its own. It was all happening right in front of him. He felt the bass vibrating through the floor, through his very bones. He saw the sweat gleam on Elvis's brow, the way his hair fell, just so the slight smirk he'd flashed to the screaming girls in the audience. It was a performance, yes, but it felt incredibly intimate, especially from his new vantage point. He wasn't just a fan in the crowd anymore. He was Johnny, the boy Elvis had acknowledged, a boy who had been given a front row seat. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, a warmth spreading through his chest. This wasn't just a concert. It was an experience, a gift he would cherish forever. He leaned forward even further, determined to absorb every single second, every single note, every single movement of the king of rock and roll. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of electrifying sound and dazzling movement. Johnny was completely lost in the magic, his disappointment. From earlier, a distant, forgotten memory. From his front row seat, Elvis wasn't just a performer on a stage. He was a force of nature, a living legend, breathing and moving right in front of him. Elvis sang hit after hit. Hound Dog had the crowd barking along. Blue suede shoes had everyone tapping their feet. And when he launched into Love Me Tender, the arena became a sea of swaying bodies, lighters flickering in the dimness. Johnny knew every word to every song, and he found himself singing along a raw, joyous sound that somehow made it past his own ears and into the roaring symphony of the crowd. He noticed the small details, the way Elvis would sometimes squint slightly under the bright lights, the way his fingers, long and elegant, moved effortlessly over the guitar strings. He saw the subtle glances Elvis would cast towards his band members, a silent signal, a shared understanding. He saw the genuine smiles Elvis gave to the screaming fans, a silent acknowledgement of their adoration. And then there were the moves. The hip swivels, the knee bends, the effortless gliding across the stage. Johnny, who had spent countless hours practicing in front of his bedroom mirror, now saw them up close, understanding the power and precision behind each one. They weren't just dance moves. They were expressions of raw energy, a connection to the music that captivated everyone in the arena. Every time Elvis spun or thrust his hips, a fresh wave of screams erupted, and Johnny felt the electricity surge through the crowd. Elvis had a way of making eye contact with different sections of the audience, making each fan feel special. Several times throughout the show, his gaze seemed to linger on Johnny for a fraction of a second longer than others. Each time Johnny's heart would leap into his throat, he would grin back, a wide, uninhibited grin, feeling like he and Elvis shared a secret understanding. During Jailhouse Rock, Elvis threw his guitar pick into the crowd. Johnny watched it tumble through the air, but it landed a few rows back. He felt a pang of slight disappointment, but it was quickly overshadowed by the sheer joy of being there, experiencing it all. Later, during a slower song, Can't Help Falling in Love, Elvis reached out towards the crowd, and a few lucky fans were able to touch his outstretched hand. Johnny, caught up in the moment, reached out too, his small hand stretching as far as it could. He didn't quite make contact, but he felt the rush of the air as Elvis's hand passed by, a fleeting brush with greatness. It didn't matter that he didn't touch him. Just being this close was a dream come true. The concert wasn't just about the music. It was an experience, a phenomenon. The atmosphere was intoxicating, a powerful shared emotion that bound everyone in the arena together. Johnny felt a sense of belonging he'd never known before. He wasn't just an isolated fan in a small town. He was part of something huge, something legendary. He noticed other kids in the front rows, some slightly older than him, some even younger, their faces equally awestruck. He realized that this wasn't just his dream. It was a dream shared by millions. But tonight he was one of the very few who got to live it from the best possible spot. As the concert neared its end, Elvis slowed down, addressing the crowd. His voice, hoarse from singing, was full of warmth. Thank you very much," he said, and the arena erupted in another thunderous applause. "You've been a fantastic audience tonight. I love you all." Johnny clapped until his hands stung, his throat raw from cheering. He didn't want it to end. This was the moment he had dreamed of, worked for, and now it was drawing to a close. But the memories he was making, the feelings that surged through him, would last a lifetime. He knew with absolute certainty that he would never forget a single second of this incredible night. This wasn't just a concert, it was the ultimate realization of a dream. The final chords of Elvis's encore faded, replaced by the lingering echoes of the crowd's thunderous applause. Elvis took a final bow, a sweat-soaked, dazzling smile on his face. And then, with a wave, he turned and strode off the stage, disappearing into the wings. The lights in the arena slowly brightened, and a collective sigh, a mix of satisfaction and longing, swept through the audience. Johnny remained rooted to his seat, dazed. His ears were ringing, his throat was sore, and his hands were stinging from clapping. But he didn't care. His mind was still on the stage, replaying every powerful vocal, every mesmerizing hip swivel. He felt like he had just woken up from the most incredible dream. People around him began to stand, gathering their coats and programs, murmuring excitedly about the show. Johnny slowly rose, feeling a little unsteady on his feet. The energy that had filled him during the concert was slowly replaced by a warm, lingering afterglow. He looked to the empty stage one last time, a silent promise to remember every detail. As he walked towards the exit with the flowing stream of people, the sounds of Elvis' songs still hummed in his ears. He heard snippets of conversation. Wasn't he just divine? Did you see that white suit? I swear he looked right at me. Johnny smiled to himself, a private, knowing smile. He knew Elvis had looked right at him. He made his way through the bustling corridors, past the concession stands and souvenir stalls, feeling a sense of quiet contentment. He felt different somehow. Not just because he'd seen Elvis, but because of how he'd seen him. The kindness of a stranger, the incredible upgrade, the brief, surreal meeting with his hero. It all added up to something more profound than just a concert. It was a story. His story. He found his parents waiting for him at the designated meeting spot outside the arena, their faces etched with a mixture of concern and anticipation. When his mom saw him, her face lit up. "Johnny, there you are! How was it, honey?" Johnny grinned, a wide, genuine smile that stretched his face. "It was incredible, Mom. Amazing." His dad clapped him on the shoulder. "Good to hear, son. Loud enough for you up there in the nosebleeds." Johnny took a deep breath, his heart swelling with the unbelievable truth. "Actually, Dad," he began, his voice still a little hoarse, "I didn't sit in the nosebleeds." His parents exchanged a curious glance. "Oh, did you move down a bit when the crowd thinned?" his mom asked, amused. "No," Johnny said, shaking his head. "I sat in the front row." His parents paused, then chuckled. "All right, Johnny boy, that's a good one," his dad said, his eyes twinkling. "Front row, eh? Next you'll be telling us you had a chat with Elvis himself." Johnny's grin widened. "I did," he said simply, his eyes shining. "He ruffled my hair, and he called me Johnny. And he told Mr. Roberts to put me in the front row because I saved up all my money for the ticket." His parents stopped walking, staring at him. Their smiles faded, replaced by expressions of disbelief. "Johnny, are you feeling all right?" his mom asked, putting a hand on his forehead. "I'm serious," he insisted, his voice firm. Pulled out the crumpled ticket stub, the section 304, row C, seat 1. "This was my ticket, but then Mr. Roberts, he came and found me and took me backstage, and Elvis was there, and he said he heard about me, and he told them to put me in the front row. He knew it sounded wild, unbelievable. But it was the truth." He recounted the story, his words tumbling out in a rush, reliving every detail. The man in the suit, the secret hallway, the moment Elvis turned and spoke to him. His parents listened, their expressions slowly shifting from skepticism to wonder, then to a quiet, dawning pride. His mom's eyes welled up. "Oh, Johnny," she whispered, pulling him into a tight hug. "My goodness, you really did." His dad cleared his throat, a suspicious dampness in his own eyes. "Well, That's quite a story, son, quite a story indeed." He clapped Johnny on the back, a proud, firm clap. The drive home felt different. Johnny felt lighter, happier. He stared out the window, not at the passing landscape, but at the memories swirling in his mind. He wasn't just a fan who saw Elvis, he was the fan Elvis had noticed, the boy whose dream had been given a helping hand. Back in his room, he carefully placed his crumpled ticket stub next to his Elvis records. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a tangible reminder of a magical night. This experience wasn't just about music anymore. It was about kindness, about dreams coming true, about the unexpected generosity of a true king. He knew that for the rest of his life, whenever he heard an Elvis song, he wouldn't just hear the music. He would feel the vibrations of the front row, see the twinkle in Elvis's eye, and remember the night his dream had truly come alive. And he knew, deep in his heart, that some dreams, with a little hard work and a touch of magic, really did come true.